What if the future of dating isn't in your city, but in another country? Right now, thousands of American men are packing their bags, booking one-way flights, and looking for love overseas. They call themselves passport brothers. Supporters say they're escaping a broken dating culture. Critics say they're running from accountability. And online, the debate is explosive. But here's the real question. Is this about love or power? Is it about freedom or frustration? And what does it say about modern relationships in America? Because this isn't just a trend. It's a signal that many men feel overlooked, a signal that dating expectations have shifted, a signal that globalization has entered the most personal part of life. In this video, we're going deeper than viral clips and hot takes. We'll break down why some men believe dating abroad offers more respect and traditional values. We'll look at the economic advantages that make overseas living attractive. We'll examine the serious risks, scams, legal battles, cultural isolation. And we'll confront the biggest criticism head-on. Is this genuine connection or a search for imbalance? By the end, you won't just understand the movement. You'll understand what it reveals about money, gender roles, globalization, and the quiet tension shaping modern relationships. Stay with me, because the surface explanation is simple, but the real story is much bigger. Please like, subscribe, turn on notifications, and comment the next video topic in the comments. What if the problem isn't dating apps? What if it isn't modern relationships? What if it isn't men or women? What if it's geography? That idea, controversial, emotional, and heavily debated, is at the center of a growing online movement known as Passport Brothers. Some people say it's about freedom. Others say it's about escapism. Critics call it toxic. Supporters call it honest. And depending on who you ask, Passport Brothers are either finding happiness abroad or running from problems at home. In this video, we're not here to judge. We're here to understand. Where did this movement come from? Why did it grow so fast? What are men actually searching for when they leave their home country to date or build relationships elsewhere? And most importantly, does leaving really solve anything? By the end of this series, you'll understand the motivations, the realities, the myths, and the consequences of the Passport Brothers movement, including what happens after the camera stops recording and real life begins. But first, we need to define what Passport Brothers actually are. At its core, Passport Brothers refers to men who travel or relocate to other countries in search of dating, relationships, or marriage, often because they feel dissatisfied with dating culture in their home country. The term gained popularity online through social media, podcasts, and travel content. You'll often hear phrases like, "Dating is broken at home. Traditional values still exist overseas. I'm treated better abroad. My passport changed my life." For supporters, it's about options. For critics, it's about avoidance. But the movement didn't appear out of nowhere. To understand Passport Brothers, we need to zoom out. Dating culture has changed dramatically in the last 2 decades. Apps replaced introductions. Algorithms replaced chance encounters. Social media reshaped expectations. People now compare endlessly, not just to real people, but to curated highlight reels. And for many men, this shift created frustration. Some feel invisible. Some feel rejected. Some feel judged primarily by income, status, or appearance. Whether those feelings are justified or not isn't the point. What matters is that they're real to the people experiencing them. And when frustration builds, people look for alternatives. For some men, that alternative became international dating. Travel itself isn't new. People have always met partners across borders. What is new is how openly and aggressively this idea is marketed online. Videos promise easier dating, more appreciation, traditional values, less competition, better treatment, and they often compare experiences abroad directly against dating experiences at home. This comparison is what turns travel into a movement. It's no longer just, "I met someone overseas." It becomes, "Men should leave. This system is broken. Your passport is your solution." That framing is powerful, and it spreads fast. But Passport Brothers are not a single group. That's one of the biggest misunderstandings. Some are short-term travelers. Some are digital nomads. Some are genuinely looking for marriage. Some are simply exploring. And yes, some are chasing fantasies. Reducing the movement to one stereotype misses the complexity, which is exactly why it's so polarizing. Critics argue that the movement oversimplifies cultural differences, creates unrealistic expectations, ignores power imbalances, turns relationships into transactions. Supporters argue that men are allowed to choose. Travel exposes healthier dynamics. Cultural compatibility matters. No one is forced into anything. Both sides talk past each other, and social media rewards the loudest, most extreme voices. Nuance doesn't go viral. Another key reason Passport Brothers gained attention is economics. Income differences between countries matter. A salary that feels average in one country can feel powerful in another. Country can feel powerful in another. That shift changes dating dynamics. It changes confidence. It changes lifestyle. It changes options. But here's what rarely gets discussed honestly. Economic advantage doesn't automatically create emotional connection, and financial leverage doesn't guarantee long-term compatibility. Which leads us to a critical question. Are Passport Brothers finding genuine relationships or temporary validation? That answer depends heavily on expectations. There's also a psychological layer here. For many men, travel represents reset, a chance to escape labels, a chance to be seen differently, a chance to start fresh. New environments remove old assumptions, and that can feel liberating. But a new location doesn't erase internal struggles, confidence issues, communication habits, emotional patterns. Those travel with you. And in later sections, we'll explore what happens when the honeymoon phase ends. Another important distinction. Passport Brothers is not the same as sex tourism. While critics often conflate the two, the reality is more complicated. Some Passport Brothers explicitly reject short-term encounters and say they want long-term commitment. Others don't. Like any movement without centralized leadership, it includes a wide spectrum of behavior, which is why judging the entire group based on the worst examples creates more heat than clarity. Understanding requires separating trends from extremes. So why does this movement trigger such strong reactions? Because it challenges narratives on both sides. It questions modern dating norms. It challenges national identity. It brings gender expectations into the spotlight. And anytime identity, relationships, and power intersect, emotions run high. But emotional reactions don't replace analysis. And that's what this series is about. In the next section, we're going to look at why men feel pushed toward this movement in the first place. What specific frustrations drive them? Is it culture, economics, technology, social expectations, or something deeper? Because before we can judge whether Passport Brothers work, we need to understand why they exist at all. And once we unpack that, the entire conversation changes. To understand why the Passport Brothers movement exists, we need to stop asking, why are men leaving? And start asking, what are they leaving behind? Because people rarely abandon their home culture without feeling pushed. For most men who identify with this movement, the decision didn't start with a plane ticket. It started with frustration, with exhaustion, with the feeling that no matter how much effort they put in, the system wasn't working for them. And whether you agree with their conclusions or not, those feelings didn't appear out of thin air. One of the biggest pressures comes from modern dating economics. Dating today is heavily shaped by technology. Apps have turned attraction into data. Swipe-based systems reward instant visual appeal. Algorithms concentrate attention on a small percentage of users. For many men, this creates an environment where rejection is constant, feedback is minimal, improvement feels unclear. When effort doesn't translate into results, people look for explanations. Some blame themselves. Some blame society. Some blame dating culture. Passport Brothers often arrive at the same conclusion. This environment isn't built for me. Another factor is competition concentration. In large Western cities, dating pools are dense, but attention is uneven. A relatively small group of men receives the majority of interest. That doesn't mean average men can't date, but it does mean the experience can feel discouraging. Repeated rejection, ghosting, or being overlooked can wear down confidence. Over time, frustration turns into disengagement, and disengagement eventually turns into exploration of alternatives. There's also a cultural expectation gap. Many men report confusion about what is expected of them in relationships. They're told to be confident but not dominant, be emotionally open but not vulnerable, be successful but not intimidating, be traditional but not controlling. These mixed signals create anxiety. Some men feel like the rules are constantly shifting, and that making one wrong move leads to rejection or judgment. Whether that perception is accurate or not, it shapes behavior. And for some, leaving feels simpler than navigating unclear expectations. Another major pressure point is identity and respect. Many passport brothers say they don't feel valued at home. Not just romantically, socially. They describe feeling invisible or dismissed unless they meet specific standards of income, status, or appearance. Abroad, they often report the opposite. They feel noticed. They feel welcomed. They feel interesting. Sometimes that's cultural difference. Sometimes it's novelty. Sometimes it's perception. But emotionally, it feels real. And for someone who hasn't felt that in years, it can be powerful. This leads into the idea of status relocation. Status isn't universal. A man who feels average in one country may feel exceptional in another. Language, accent, nationality, and background can all change how someone is perceived. Passport brothers often describe this as finally being seen for who they are. But here's the critical detail. Status gained through location can disappear once novelty fades. And that becomes important later. Another overlooked factor is economic pressure. In many Western countries, the cost of living has risen faster than wages. Housing, healthcare, childcare, and education costs create financial strain. For men who want to be providers, or simply financially stable, this pressure can feel overwhelming. Abroad, lower costs change the math. Suddenly, one income feels enough. Saving feels possible. Long-term planning feels realistic. This isn't about greed. It's about feasibility. And for some men, moving feels like the only way to access a life they want. There's also emotional burnout. Dating fatigue is real. Endless messaging. First dates that go nowhere. Ghosting without explanation. Over time, this creates emotional numbness. Some men report that dating abroad feels more direct, more intentional, and less exhausting. Fewer games. Clearer interest. Faster progression. Again, this doesn't mean it's better, but it feels different. And difference feels hopeful. Another pressure comes from online narratives. Social media amplifies extremes. Men constantly see content telling them they're replaceable, they're not enough, they're part of the problem. At the same time, they see passport brothers' content promising respect, peace, appreciation, simplicity. When one narrative feels condemning and the other feels validating, the choice becomes emotionally easy. That doesn't mean it's correct, but it explains why it's appealing. It's important to say this clearly. Not all men who leave are bitter. Not all are angry. Not all hate women. Many are simply tired. Tired of trying to decode a system that feels stacked against them. Tired of being told their frustration isn't valid. Travel becomes a reset button. Or at least, it feels like one. But here's the tension at the heart of the Passport Brothers movement. Are men leaving because they found something better? Or because they couldn't make something work? And does that distinction even matter? Because in the short term, the results often feel positive. More attention, more confidence, more opportunity. Which brings us to the next critical question. What exactly are passport brothers seeking overseas? Is it love? Is it control? Is it peace? Is it validation? Or is it something they can't name yet? That's where the conversation gets uncomfortable. And that's exactly where we're going next. In part 3, we'll explore the core motivations behind the movement, cultural values, relationship expectations, and the idea of traditional roles. And once we break those down, the entire debate starts to look very different. By the time most passport brothers decide to leave the United States, they're no longer just reacting to dating frustration. They're chasing something specific. Not just a partner. Not just romance. They're chasing a relationship structure that feels stable, predictable, and meaningful to them. And this is where the movement becomes most controversial. Because what many passport brothers say they want sounds simple on the surface, but carries a lot of cultural weight underneath. The most common phrase you'll hear is this: I want traditional values. But what does that actually mean? Because traditional means very different things depending on who's saying it. For passport brothers, it usually includes a few core ideas. First, clear gender roles. Many men in the movement say they feel more comfortable when roles are defined instead of negotiated. They want to provide financially, protect their family, lead household decisions. In return, they hope for loyalty, support, appreciation, a partner focused on family over career competition. To them, this isn't about control. It's about clarity. They believe modern Western dating blurred roles so much that expectations became confusing and stressful. Whether that belief is fair or not, it's central to the movement. Second, emphasis on family over individualism. In many Western societies, personal fulfillment is prioritized above long-term sacrifice. Passport brothers often describe this as exhausting. They want relationships where long-term commitment comes early. Marriage is a goal, not a question mark. Children and extended family are valued. In many countries, family still sits at the center of adult life. That cultural alignment feels comforting to men who grew up expecting marriage and children to be milestones, not optional upgrades. Third, respect as a baseline. This is one of the most emotionally charged motivations. Many passport brothers say they don't feel respected in Western dating culture unless they meet very specific benchmarks. They feel judged by income, height, status, lifestyle optics. Abroad, they often report being treated with warmth before being evaluated. That difference matters deeply. Respect doesn't just affect dating, it affects identity. When someone feels respected, they behave more confidently, more generously, and more openly. That creates a feedback loop that reinforces the choice to stay. Another factor is communication style. Men in the movement often describe Western dating as indirect. Mixed signals, ambiguity, unspoken expectations. In contrast, many international dating experiences feel more direct. Interest is shown clearly. Disinterest is expressed quickly. Intentions are discussed early. This reduces emotional uncertainty. And for men who are tired of guessing, that clarity feels like peace. There's also the concept of femininity, which is one of the most misunderstood parts of the movement. Passport brothers often say they're looking for feminine partners. What they usually mean is nurturing behavior, emotional warmth, cooperation over competition, comfort with traditional domestic roles. Critics argue this expectation limits women's autonomy. Supporters argue it's simply preference. The truth is more complicated. Cultural norms shape how femininity is expressed. In some cultures, traditional femininity is still celebrated, not seen as weakness, but as strength. Men attracted to that expression naturally gravitate toward environments where it exists. But here's where the tension begins. Are these values authentic, or are they situational? Because when someone moves to a new country, they're seen as exotic. They're treated as guests. They often interact within dating bubbles, not everyday life. What feels like deep cultural alignment early on may actually be honeymoon phase perception, and that difference becomes crucial later. Another motivation is emotional safety. Many passport brothers describe Western dating as emotionally risky. They fear public shaming, social consequences of rejection, being labeled negatively after conflicts. Abroad, those fears feel reduced. They believe relationship disagreements stay private and personal. That sense of safety encourages vulnerability. But vulnerability built on perceived power differences can be fragile, which leads to one of the biggest unspoken dynamics in the movement. Power imbalance. Even when intentions are good, differences in wealth, citizenship, language, social mobility create uneven footing. Some passport brothers deny this matters. Critics argue it defines the entire dynamic. Both can be partially true. A relationship can feel loving and still carry structural imbalance. And if that imbalance isn't acknowledged, it can create problems later. Another motivation is escape from dating narratives. Online discourse often frames men as problems to be corrected. Some passport brothers feel they're constantly told what not to be, without being told what they should be instead. Abroad, they feel free from those narratives. They're not debating gender politics. They're just dating. That mental relief is often mistaken for happiness until deeper challenges emerge. Here's the key question many men don't ask early enough. Are you moving towards something or running away from something? Because the answer changes everything. If you're moving towards shared values, alignment, and mutual respect, the lifestyle may work. If you're running from rejection, resentment, or unresolved expectations, the same issues often resurface later, just in a different language. And that brings us to the next phase of the Passport Brothers story. Because motivation alone doesn't determine outcome. Logistics matter. Money matters. Legal systems matter. And once relationships move beyond dating into marriage, visas, and long-term commitment, the stakes rise sharply. In Part 4, we'll examine the real-world consequences of the lifestyle, the advantages people brag about, the risks they downplay, and the legal realities that many men don't fully understand until it's too late. By the time someone commits to the passport bro lifestyle, the decision usually feels empowering. They found attention. They found connection. They found a sense of relief they didn't feel before. But this is the point where the story gets complicated, because every advantage comes with a hidden cost. And many of the biggest risks don't show up in the first few months. They appear later, when emotions, money, and long-term plans collide. Let's start with the advantages, because they are real. Ignoring them would miss why the movement exists in the first place. The first major advantage is abundance. Many passport brothers experience something they never felt before: choice. Not just more matches, but more genuine interest. In many countries, Western men are seen as stable. Long-term commitment is expected early. Dating is more intentional. This creates a feeling of momentum. Instead of chasing attention, attention comes to them. That shift alone can dramatically change confidence and self-image. The second advantage is status elevation. In the United States, many men feel invisible unless they reach elite levels of income or social standing. Abroad, being American often carries built-in status. It signals financial opportunity, mobility, access to a different future. Even men who felt average at home may feel valued for the first time. That emotional shift is powerful and sometimes addictive. The third advantage is economic leverage, often called geographical arbitrage. By living in countries with lower costs of living, men can afford better housing, eat out regularly, support a household on one income. This recreates a lifestyle that used to be common in the U.S., but now feels unattainable. For men who want to provide, this restores a sense of purpose. But economic leverage also introduces risk, because money changes dynamics, whether acknowledged or not. The fourth advantage is relationship alignment. Many passport brothers report faster progression toward exclusivity, marriage discussions, family planning. In cultures where dating is goal-oriented, ambiguity disappears quickly. For men who value structure, this feels reassuring. But speed can hide incompatibility, and that's where problems begin. Now let's talk about the risks, the ones rarely emphasized online. The first major risk is financial exploitation. When someone is perceived as wealthy, they attract attention. Not all of it is sincere. Some partners may request financial help early, frame money needs as emergencies, expect ongoing support for extended family. Even when intentions start genuine, expectations can quietly shift. And once money enters the relationship, it's hard to remove. Many men realize too late that affection was conditional. The second risk is emotional mismatch. Early attention can feel like love, but attention is not commitment. Cultural differences in expressing affection can mask deeper incompatibilities. What feels like passion early on may be novelty, curiosity, opportunity. When daily life sets in, differences in values, conflict resolution, and expectations surface. And resolving conflict across cultures is harder than dating across cultures. The third risk is cultural and social isolation. Living abroad isn't a vacation. Over time, men face language barriers, bureaucratic frustration, limited local friendships. Many rely almost entirely on their partner for social connection. That creates emotional dependency. If the relationship struggles, everything struggles. Loneliness abroad can be more intense than loneliness at home. Another risk is resentment from local men. In some regions, Western men dating local women are viewed negatively. This can lead to social tension, hostility, safety concerns, being perceived as exploiting. Economic differences, whether fair or not, carries consequences. Most men don't consider this until it becomes unavoidable. Then there's the issue of long-term power imbalance. At first, being the provider feels positive, but over time, imbalance can lead to pressure, control struggles, unspoken resentment on both sides. If one person controls money, mobility, and legal status, equality becomes difficult. Even healthy couples must actively manage this imbalance to avoid damage. Now let's talk about something many men underestimate: bringing a partner back to the United States. This is where fantasy meets reality. Immigration is not romantic. It is slow, expensive, and unforgiving. The process can take 12 to 24 months, thousands of dollars, extensive documentation, and approval is never guaranteed. Immigration officers assume fraud by default. Every detail is scrutinized. Age gaps, cultural differences, language barriers. Anything unusual becomes a red flag. Men are also legally bound through the affidavit of support. This is not symbolic. It is a binding financial contract with the U.S. government. Even if the marriage fails, the relationship ends, divorce occurs, the obligation can last for years. Many men don't fully understand this until it's too late. There's also the psychological shift when partners move to the U.S. The power dynamic changes. The partner gains legal rights, employment opportunities, independence. Some relationships survive this transition. Others collapse under the pressure. What worked abroad doesn't always translate back home. Now let's talk about public perception and backlash. Passport brothers face intense criticism online. They're often labeled predatory, misogynistic, exploitative. Some of that criticism is unfair. Some of it highlights real ethical concerns. The truth is, the movement includes a wide range of people, from sincere men seeking connection to those seeking control. Public backlash creates stress and defensiveness. Men often retreat further into the lifestyle rather than self-reflect. And here's the deepest risk of all: avoiding personal growth. Leaving a country doesn't automatically solve internal issues. If someone struggles with communication, emotional regulation, expectations, those struggles follow them. They just appear later and with higher stakes. So here's the real trade-off. Passport brothers often gain attention, status, opportunity, but they risk exploitation, isolation, legal entanglement, emotional disappointment. The lifestyle can work, but it demands self-awareness, patience, and ethical responsibility. Without those, the same pain that drove men away from the U.S. can resurface, only harder to escape. And that leads to the final question. Is the passport bro movement a solution or a temporary refuge? In Part 5, we'll look at the long-term outcomes. Who actually builds stable lives abroad? Who returns disillusioned? And what determines the difference between success and regret? By this point in the story, one truth becomes unavoidable. The passport bro lifestyle does not have a single ending. Some men build stable families, lasting relationships, and lives they genuinely prefer. Others return home quietly, emotionally drained, financially strained, and more confused than when they left. The difference between those two outcomes is not luck. It is not the country, and it is not the women. It is how and why the man entered the lifestyle in the first place. Let's start with the men who succeed long-term. These men share several traits that rarely get discussed online. First, successful passport brothers do not see the lifestyle as an escape. They see it as a relocation. They are not running from rejection, bitterness, or resentment. They are moving toward a specific culture, a specific way of life, a clearly defined relationship goal. They research the country before arriving. They learn the language. They respect local norms. They do not expect instant loyalty simply because they are foreign. This mindset alone dramatically changes outcomes. Second, they do not rely on money as their main advantage. They may earn more than locals, but they do not lead with it. They avoid flashy spending, constant financial rescue, early financial dependence. Instead, they allow attraction to develop without creating obligation. This filters out people who are motivated only by resources. It also creates healthier power dynamics later. Third, successful men date slowly, even when options feel abundant. They resist the illusion that speed equals compatibility. They observe how a partner handles conflict, treats family, responds to boundaries, acts when money is not involved. They understand that chemistry is easy, compatibility is not. Fourth, they plan for two futures, not one. They ask hard questions early. What happens if we move to the U.S.? What happens if we stay here? How will finances work either way? What does independence look like for both partners? They do not assume everything will remain as it is, because nothing does. Now let's look at the men who struggle or fail. Their patterns are just as consistent. The first warning sign is resentment-driven motivation. These men leave the U.S. angry. Angry at dating apps. Angry at women. Angry at society. That anger doesn't disappear abroad. It just gets redirected. And when the honeymoon phase ends, resentment returns, often stronger. The second issue is confusing attention with respect. Early attention feels intoxicating, but attention does not equal loyalty, emotional maturity, shared values. Men who chase attention rather than connection often overlook red flags. By the time they notice them, emotions or finances are already entangled. Another common failure point is overinvestment too early. This includes moving in quickly, financial support before commitment, immigration plans before stability. Speed feels efficient. In reality, it removes protective friction. And once momentum builds, reversing course becomes emotionally painful. Then there is identity collapse. Some men build their entire sense of worth around being desired abroad. When challenges arise, arguments, cultural clashes, or rejection, they feel destabilized. They no longer know who they are without constant validation. This leads to control issues, insecurity, or withdrawal. And finally, there is return shock. Many men eventually return to the U.S., temporarily or permanently. When they do, they face higher living costs, lower dating leverage, a culture they no longer fully relate to. Some reintegrate successfully. Others feel displaced, belonging nowhere. The lifestyle changed them, but not always in ways they anticipated. Now let's address the ethical question, because it matters. Is the passport bro lifestyle inherently exploitative? The honest answer is this. It depends on behavior, not geography. Exploitation happens when economic imbalance is intentionally leveraged. Dependency is encouraged. Consent is blurred by survival needs. Healthy relationships happen when choice exists on both sides. Boundaries are respected. Independence is supported. A passport does not create exploitation, but it can enable it if the person chooses to. The men who thrive long-term understand something crucial. They are guests in another culture, not saviors, not rescuers, not rulers. Guests. That humility changes everything. So what is the real lesson of the passport bro movement? It is not that American dating is broken, and it is not that foreign women are better. It is that modern dating has become disconnected from intentional living. Passport brothers force a confrontation with questions many avoid. What do I actually want? What am I offering? What kind of life am I building? For some men, going abroad helps answer those questions. For others, it simply delays them. Here is the final truth. The passport bro lifestyle amplifies who you already are. If you are grounded, respectful, and self-aware, it can open doors. If you are angry, avoidant, or chasing validation, it will expose those flaws eventually, just with higher stakes. So the question is not whether men should date abroad. The question is, are you moving towards something meaningful, or just running from discomfort? That answer determines everything. At the surface, the passport bro movement looks like a dating trend. Men traveling, men dating abroad, men rejecting Western dating culture. But when you zoom out, it becomes clear that this movement is not really about women at all. It is about men responding to a system they no longer feel works for them. And that matters, because movements don't appear unless something underneath is broken, strained, or changing. The rise of passport brothers reflects a deeper shift in how many American men experience adulthood. For decades, there was a clear path. Work hard, build a career, find a partner, start a family. That path no longer feels guaranteed. Housing is expensive. Wages lag behind costs. Dating is algorithm-driven. Social expectations feel unclear and contradictory. For some men, going abroad feels like regaining structure and clarity. Not dominance, not superiority, clarity. And this is where the conversation often gets misunderstood. Critics focus on the loudest voices online, the most extreme clips, the most bitter statements, the most provocative language. But movements are never defined only by their worst representatives. They are defined by why people keep joining them. And men keep joining this one because it offers something they feel is missing at home. What's missing isn't just romantic success. It's direction. Many men feel they are constantly evaluated but rarely chosen. Told to improve, but never told when improvement is enough. Expected to provide, but criticized for wanting appreciation. The passport bro movement offers a simple promise. Not an easy life, a clearer one. At the same time, the movement exposes uncomfortable truths that cannot be ignored. Economic imbalance does distort relationships. Cultural misunderstanding does create risk. Some men do misuse their position. Some women do exploit opportunity. Both can be true at once. And pretending otherwise only guarantees repeat mistakes. The future of this movement will likely split in two directions. One path becomes louder, more extreme, more defensive, more focused on grievances than growth. That path will burn out. Movements fueled by resentment always do. The other path becomes quieter, more intentional, and more selective. Men who choose fewer relationships, move more thoughtfully, focus on lifestyle alignment, not leverage, build lives instead of chasing validation. That version may not trend on social media, but it will last. And here's the irony. As more men leave to find clarity abroad, pressure builds at home. Dating norms adjust. Expectations shift. Conversations reopen. Movements don't just escape systems. They force systems to respond. So what should someone actually take away from all of this? Not that American dating is hopeless. Not that foreign dating is perfect. But that modern relationships are no longer automatic. They require intention, honesty, and trade-offs. No country removes that responsibility. It only changes the context. The Passport Bro movement is not a solution. It is a signal that many men feel unheard. A signal that dating norms are misaligned. A signal that people are willing to move continents rather than stay silent. And signals demand attention, not dismissal. So the real question isn't whether Passport Brothers are right or wrong. The real question is, what kind of life are you actually building? And are your relationship choices helping or hurting that vision? Because no passport, no country, and no partner can answer that for you. Only you can. Before you decide whether the Passport Bro movement is good, bad, smart, reckless, empowering, or exploitative, you have to zoom out. Because this isn't just about American men. It's about something much bigger. It's about loneliness. It's about power. And it's about what happens when the world becomes so connected that relationships become global markets. For most of human history, you married within walking distance of your home. Your dating pool was your town, your church, your village, your workplace. Today, your dating pool is the planet. Apps have removed geography. Air travel has removed borders. Remote work has removed location. And social media has removed mystery. That changes everything. When relationships become global, they also become comparative. You are no longer competing with the people in your neighborhood. You are competing with people thousands of miles away. Different cultures, different expectations, different standards. That creates pressure on both men and women. And pressure always produces reactions. The Passport Bro movement is one of those reactions. But here's the uncomfortable part. This is not only happening with men. Women are doing it too. Women relocate for lifestyle. Women move abroad for romance. Women pursue partners in cultures that align more closely with their values. The difference is branding. One trend is called adventurous. The other is called controversial. That tells you something about how narratives shape perception. Now let's talk about power. Because critics often argue that the movement is about power imbalance. And sometimes it is. Economic imbalance exists. Citizenship imbalance exists. Language imbalance exists. But here's the part rarely discussed. Power is not fixed. It shifts. A man may arrive with financial leverage. But once immigration paperwork is signed, that leverage changes. Once permanent residency is granted, that leverage shifts again. Once citizenship is obtained, the balance resets entirely. Power in relationships is dynamic. And anyone entering a cross-border relationship without understanding that is naive. Now let's talk about loneliness. Because underneath the debates, the criticism, the praise, the TikTok clips, there is loneliness. American men report rising isolation, fewer friendships, lower marriage rates, less frequent social interaction, more screen time, more work, less community. For some men, leaving the country feels less like escape and more like survival. They want connection. They want belonging. They want to feel chosen. That desire is not controversial. It is human. But here is the danger. If you move countries without fixing your internal patterns, you export your problems. If you struggled with communication at home, you will struggle abroad. If you struggled with insecurity, geography will not cure it. If you struggled with unrealistic expectations, those expectations will travel with you. A passport changes location. It does not change character. And this is where the movement will either mature or collapse. There is also the economic reality. Global mobility is a privilege. Not every man can become a digital nomad. Not every man has remote income. Not every man can navigate visas. So the online narrative sometimes oversells accessibility. The lifestyle requires money, flexibility, emotional resilience, cultural adaptability, patience. Without those, it becomes fantasy. There is another long-term effect worth discussing. As global dating becomes normalized, standards shift on both sides. Women abroad become more aware of Western income levels. Men become more aware of international options. Expectations rise. Competition increases. The novelty fades. What felt rare becomes common. And when novelty fades, compatibility matters more than status. That is where many relationships either stabilize or break. Now let's talk about identity. Many passport brothers say they feel more masculine abroad, more appreciated, more respected. That raises an important question. Is masculinity defined by geography or by behavior? If a man feels confident in one country and insecure in another, what changed? The culture or the feedback he received? Confidence built only on external validation is fragile. True confidence survives across borders, and that distinction determines long-term success. There is also the future to consider. As more people date internationally, governments respond. Immigration policies tighten. Financial sponsorship rules increase. Fraud investigations become stricter. The legal pathway becomes more complicated. That is already happening, which means the movement will likely shrink to those willing to handle bureaucracy. Casual participants will drop out. Committed ones will remain. Now let's address the biggest misconception, that this movement is about hatred. For some loud voices, maybe, but for most participants, it is about perceived misalignment. They feel culturally incompatible with mainstream dating norms in their home country, so they look elsewhere. That is not new. People have migrated for compatibility for centuries. What's new is that they livestream it, and social media amplifies everything, especially conflict. Here's the reality most people don't want to admit. Modern dating is harder for many people, men and women. Expectations have expanded. Economic pressure has increased. Gender roles have evolved rapidly. Technology has reshaped communication. Nobody received a manual, so people experiment. Some experiment locally. Some experiment globally. Both are attempts to solve the same problem. So what happens next? Two possibilities. The movement stabilizes into a niche lifestyle choice, or it burns out as hype fades. Most likely, it becomes normalized. Not dramatic. Not viral. Just another option among many. And once something becomes normal, the controversy fades. So here's the final lens to look through. If someone chooses to live abroad and builds a healthy, mutual, respectful relationship, that's success. If someone chooses to stay home and builds a healthy, mutual, respectful relationship, that's also success. The location is secondary. The foundation is primary. Mutual respect, shared values, aligned expectations, emotional maturity. Those determine outcomes, not passport stamps. And maybe the biggest lesson of all is this. When large numbers of people feel dissatisfied, they don't disappear. They move. They adapt. They search. The Passport Bro movement is not the cause of something. It is the symptom of something. A symptom of rapid social change, of economic strain, of shifting gender expectations, of digital dating fatigue, of global mobility. Understanding the symptom helps us understand the system. And that conversation is far more important than online arguments. So here's the final question. If the entire world is now your dating pool, what kind of partner are you becoming? Because in a global marketplace of relationships, self-awareness may matter more than geography ever did. And that's something no passport can give you. Let's imagine something. Fast forward 10 years. Remote work is even more common. International travel is cheaper. Translation technology is instant and seamless. Video calls feel almost holographic. Dating apps allow you to filter by country, culture, language, and even values. At that point, is international dating still a movement? Or is it just normal? Because that's where this conversation is heading. The Passport Bro trend didn't appear out of nowhere. It appeared at the intersection of three massive shifts: global mobility, digital dating fatigue, and cultural realignment. When those forces collide, behavior changes. And what we're witnessing isn't just men flying overseas. We're witnessing the early stages of globalized intimacy. That's a much bigger story. For most of history, your romantic options were limited by geography. Now your options are limited by Wi-Fi. That changes how people think about commitment. It changes how people think about leverage. And it changes how people think about what they deserve. When the world becomes your option pool, comparison becomes constant. And comparison can be dangerous. Because when you believe there is always someone better in another country, you may struggle to commit anywhere. Now here's the paradox. Global access creates more options, but more options don't always create more happiness. Psychology shows something interesting. When people have too many choices, satisfaction often decreases. Why? Because every decision feels like a compromise. If you can date anywhere, then every partner feels like you're rejecting thousands of alternatives. That mindset quietly erodes gratitude. And gratitude is the foundation of long-term stability. So what happens when dating becomes global competition? Standards rise. Expectations rise. Self-presentation becomes more strategic. People curate themselves, optimize themselves, brand themselves. And when relationships begin to feel like negotiations, romance can start to feel transactional. That's not unique to Passport Brothers. That's modern dating in general. Now let's talk about cultural fusion. Because here's the upside nobody talks about enough. Cross-cultural relationships can be incredibly powerful. They expose you to new perspectives, new traditions, new ways of thinking, new definitions of family. They force growth. They demand adaptability. They challenge assumptions. When done respectfully, they expand both partners. That is not exploitation. That is exchange. But exchange only works when both sides benefit. Now let's be honest about long-term challenges. Children, where do they grow up? Which language do they speak? Which culture defines their identity? Which country do they call home? These are not small decisions. They shape generations. And many couples don't think that far ahead when they're in the honeymoon phase. Long-distance love can feel cinematic. International marriage can feel adventurous. But long-term life is practical. Schools, healthcare, taxes, citizenship, extended family. If those conversations don't happen early, tension builds later. There's also the issue of return. Some men imagine living abroad permanently, but careers change. Parents age. Visas expire. Political climates shift. If the couple relocates to America, the dynamic changes. The novelty disappears. The status advantage shifts. And now compatibility stands alone without economic contrast. That transition tests whether the relationship was built on shared values or circumstances. Now let's talk about reputation. The internet has turned personal decisions into public narratives. One viral clip can define an entire group. One extreme example becomes the stereotype. But movements are rarely defined by their loudest voices. They're defined by the quiet majority. Most international couples are not posting online. They're building lives, working jobs, raising families, solving problems. That reality rarely goes viral. So where does this all go? Here's the likely path. International dating becomes normalized. The shock fades. The trend stabilizes. Governments tighten oversight. Dating platforms adapt. And eventually, the label Passport Bro disappears. What remains is simply this: people searching for compatibility beyond borders. But here's the deeper layer. If large numbers of men feel disconnected in their home country, that's data. If large numbers of women feel dissatisfied as well, that's also data. Instead of arguing about who's right or wrong, the smarter question is, what changed in the culture? Because movements don't appear in healthy systems. They appear when friction builds. And friction means something needs examination. There's also a generational shift happening. Younger generations value flexibility, autonomy, remote income, lifestyle design. The idea of staying in one place forever feels outdated to some. So international relationships may not be rebellion. They may simply reflect a more mobile world. When work is portable, love becomes portable too. But here's the caution. Mobility without stability leads to drift. You can travel endlessly and still feel empty. You can date globally and still feel alone. You can chase novelty forever and never build depth. At some point, every person must decide, do I want adventure or do I want anchoring? And sometimes those are different things. The Passport Bro conversation forces a larger reflection. What do men want today? What do women want today? And are those wants compatible? If expectations continue to diverge, global relocation may increase. If expectations realign, relocation may slow. But either way, the underlying need remains the same. Connection, respect, belonging, purpose. Those are universal, no matter the country. So let's strip away the labels. Strip away the hashtags. Strip away the online debates. What's left? Human beings trying to build meaningful lives. Some choose to do that at home. Some choose to do it abroad. Both paths carry risks. Both paths carry rewards. And neither guarantees happiness. So here's the final thought. If the entire world is available to you, where would you go? And more importantly, who would you need to become to build something lasting there? Because in the end, the passport is just a tool. Character travels with you. Expectations travel with you. Insecurities travel with you. Values travel with you. And the success of any relationship, local or global, depends far less on geography and far more on maturity. The world is more connected than ever. Love is more borderless than ever. And the real question isn't whether people should look abroad. The real question is, in a world with infinite options, what kind of partner are you becoming? Because that answer determines everything. Step back from the flights. Step back from the visas. Step back from the viral clips. Forget the label for a moment. Because what we're really looking at isn't just a dating trend. We're looking at a signal. And signals matter. When a noticeable number of men say, "I feel unseen here," that is a signal. When a noticeable number of women say, "I feel exhausted here," that is also a signal. Movements don't grow unless something underneath them is unresolved. So what exactly is unresolved? That's what this final section is about. For decades, the traditional model of relationships in America looked like this. One income, clear gender roles, marriage early, children soon after, community support nearby. That model had flaws. It limited opportunity for many women. It placed enormous pressure on men. It sometimes trapped people in unhappy dynamics. But it was predictable. Predictability creates psychological comfort. Then everything changed. Dual-income households became normal. Women gained financial independence. Cultural expectations shifted. Marriage age increased. Divorce became less stigmatized. Dating apps expanded options infinitely. The old script disappeared, and no new universal script replaced it. That uncertainty is uncomfortable. Some men interpret that uncertainty as instability. Some women interpret it as freedom. Both perspectives can exist at the same time. But when two groups experience the same shift differently, friction follows. And friction creates narratives. The Passport Bro narrative is one of those narratives. It says, if I can't find what I want here, I'll look somewhere else. But beneath that statement is something deeper. I don't feel aligned with my environment. Alignment is the real issue. Now let's examine modern male identity for a moment. For generations, male identity was tightly connected to provision. Provide financially. Protect physically. Lead decisively. Today, physical protection is less central. Economic provision is harder due to rising costs. Leadership expectations are culturally debated. So many men feel like the old metrics no longer apply. But no clear replacement metric has been universally agreed upon. That creates confusion. And when identity feels unstable, people search for environments where they feel more certain. For some men, that environment feels easier to find overseas. Not because they are superior, not because foreign women are inferior, but because expectations may feel more clearly defined. Clarity reduces anxiety. Now look at the female perspective. Women today often pursue education at higher rates. They enter professional careers. They delay marriage intentionally. They prioritize independence. For many women, this isn't rejection of relationships. It's protection against dependence. If earlier generations had limited options, this generation has expanded ones. And expanded options change partner selection. Financial stability becomes expected rather than appreciated. Emotional maturity becomes mandatory. Compatibility standards rise. Men who don't meet those standards may feel dismissed. Women who enforce those standards may feel justified. Again, friction. Now add technology. Dating apps introduced marketplace dynamics. Profiles, photos, swiping, algorithms. In many cities, dating can feel like competitive ranking. Height, income, education, appearance, lifestyle. That system amplifies comparison. And comparison magnifies insecurity. When people feel constantly evaluated, defensiveness grows. Online discourse becomes sharper. Gender conversations become more hostile. Extreme opinions gain traction. Moderate voices get buried. And then movements emerge. The Passport Bro movement is partly a reaction to dating app economics. If local digital competition feels overwhelming, expanding the geographic pool can feel empowering. New environment, new dynamic, new social positioning. That psychological reset is powerful. But here's the important nuance. Relocating changes context. It does not automatically change internal patterns. If someone struggles with communication, emotional regulation, or unrealistic expectations at home, those patterns travel. And eventually, they resurface. Geography can alter leverage. It cannot substitute character. Now let's zoom out even further. This movement intersects with global inequality. That's why it's controversial. When wealth gaps exist between countries, relationships can carry financial imbalance. And financial imbalance can distort power dynamics. Sometimes it works in healthy ways. Sometimes it creates dependency. Sometimes it leads to exploitation on either side. A man may be targeted for resources. A woman may feel pressured by economic vulnerability. Intent matters. Transparency matters. Mutual agency matters. Without those, imbalance becomes resentment. Another layer rarely discussed is loneliness. American society reports high levels of social isolation. Friend groups shrink after college. Community involvement declines. Work consumes time. Family disperses geographically. If a man feels romantically unsuccessful and socially isolated, overseas relocation can feel like reinvention. Reinvention is seductive, but sustainable belonging requires integration, not just relocation. Learning language, understanding customs, building local friendships. Without integration, isolation simply moves countries. Now let's address criticism carefully. Some critics say the movement objectifies women. Some supporters say critics misunderstand male frustration. Both statements contain pieces of truth depending on context. When conversations become polarized, nuance disappears. And nuance is necessary here. Some men genuinely seek cultural alignment and mutual respect. Others may pursue advantage without long-term responsibility. Some foreign partners genuinely seek cross-cultural connection. Others may prioritize immigration opportunity. Human motivation is rarely pure or singular. It's mixed, complex, layered. Reducing the conversation to heroes and villains oversimplifies reality. There's also an uncomfortable but honest point. Many people, men and women, overestimate how much geography alone changes compatibility. Shared humor, conflict resolution styles, financial habits, parenting philosophy. These matter far more than nationality. Two people from different continents can align deeply. Two people from the same neighborhood can clash constantly. Location influences culture. Culture influences behavior. But character determines longevity. Now consider long-term sustainability. If the movement grows, two outcomes are possible. 1. It pressures Western dating culture to recalibrate. 2. It simply becomes normalized and loses its shock value. Trends tend to stabilize over time. What feels disruptive today becomes ordinary tomorrow. The internet accelerates visibility. It does not guarantee permanence. Here's the deeper sociological question. Are men and women drifting apart in expectations? Or are we simply witnessing growing pains of social evolution? When roles shift rapidly, misunderstanding increases temporarily. Over time, equilibrium often returns. The 1950s were different from the 1980s. The 1980s were different from the 2000s. The 2020s are different again. Every era believes its tension is unprecedented. History suggests adaptation eventually occurs. Now let's bring it back to the individual. Strip away ideology. Strip away commentary. What does a successful relationship actually require? Respect, shared goals, emotional stability, financial transparency, patience, communication. Geography can enhance those. Geography cannot replace those. If two people build those foundations, borders matter less. If they don't, borders matter very little at all. So what does this movement ultimately reveal? It reveals dissatisfaction. It reveals aspiration. It reveals globalization. It reveals shifting gender norms. It reveals economic imbalance. It reveals loneliness. It reveals the human desire to feel valued. And that last one is universal. Every person wants to feel chosen, not tolerated, not settled for. Chosen. When someone feels chosen, loyalty strengthens. When someone feels disposable, defensiveness grows. That truth applies in every country. So here's the final thought. The world is more mobile than ever. The dating market is more global than ever. The options are wider than ever. But the fundamentals have not changed. Mutual respect still matters. Integrity still matters. Kindness still matters. Accountability still matters. If those disappear, no passport can fix it. If those exist, even long distances can be bridged. So instead of asking, is the passport bro movement right or wrong? A more powerful question might be, what does this trend reveal about how we treat each other at home? Because if enough people feel the need to leave to feel valued, that says something. And if enough people feel empowered by expanded global choice, that says something too. The world is shrinking. Expectations are rising. Identity is evolving. The question isn't whether love can cross borders. It clearly can. The question is, in a borderless world, will we become more transactional or more intentional? Because that decision shapes far more than dating. It shapes the future of relationships everywhere. Zoom out one last time. Not 5 years. Not 10 years. Think 20. Think 30. If current trends continue, remote work, global travel, rising living costs, shifting gender roles, what does dating even look like in the future? Because the passport bro movement isn't just about today. It's about direction. And direction tells you more than headlines ever will. First, global mobility is increasing. Remote work didn't disappear after the pandemic era. It expanded. More people now understand that income and location don't have to match. If you can earn in dollars and live where expenses are lower, that changes life strategy. Not just for men, for women too. This isn't a male-only shift. It's a global workforce shift. And when mobility increases, local dating markets become less dominant. Your city is no longer your only pool. Your country isn't either. That changes power dynamics. It changes expectations. It changes competition. It also changes opportunity. Second, economic pressure in the United States is not likely to vanish overnight. Housing remains expensive in major metros. Healthcare costs remain high. Childcare is costly. Student loans still exist for many. When starting a family feels financially overwhelming, people delay. When people delay, frustration increases. When frustration increases, alternative paths become more attractive. For some, that means no marriage. For others, that means relocating. For others, that means redefining what partnership looks like entirely. We're not just watching a dating trend. We're watching economic stress shape relationship decisions. Third, masculinity itself is evolving. For decades, masculinity was defined through provision and dominance. Now it's being redefined through emotional intelligence, collaboration, and adaptability. Some men embrace this shift. Others feel disoriented by it. The passport bro movement often appeals to men who feel more confident in traditional frameworks. Clear roles, clear expectations, clear responsibilities. But here's the deeper reality. Masculinity isn't static. It adapts to environment. And in a globalized world, masculine identity may become more plural than ever before. Some men will thrive in egalitarian partnerships. Some will prefer structured role divisions. The key question is compatibility, not ideology. Fourth, women globally are changing too. Education rates for women are rising in many countries. Workforce participation is increasing worldwide. Access to global media spreads ideas quickly. The assumption that certain countries will remain permanently traditional is unrealistic. Cultural shifts travel fast. What feels different today may feel familiar in 10 years. So any strategy built purely on cultural difference may face long-term change. Adaptability becomes critical. Now let's talk about technology again. Artificial intelligence is improving translation tools. Language barriers are shrinking. Cross-cultural communication is easier than ever. Video calls make distance feel smaller. Social media allows relationships to begin across continents instantly. In the future, global dating will not be niche. It may be normal, which means the passport bro label might eventually disappear. Not because the behavior stops, but because it becomes ordinary. However, normalization brings accountability. As international relationships increase, legal systems will likely tighten regulations. Visa scrutiny may increase. Fraud detection systems may improve. Financial sponsorship rules may evolve. Governments respond to patterns. If cross-border marriages rise significantly, oversight will grow too. So future participants will need to be even more informed, even more transparent, even more prepared. There's another future possibility rarely discussed. As global dating expands, so does global competition. If American men seek partners abroad for perceived advantage, foreign men may do the same elsewhere. Dating markets may become more globally fluid. Advantage in one location may be neutralized by mobility elsewhere. In other words, the edge might not last forever. Which returns us to fundamentals again. If everyone can move, what actually determines long-term success? Character, consistency, emotional maturity, reliability. Those traits scale across borders. Superficial advantage does not. Now let's consider the social consequences. If a significant number of men leave domestic dating markets, what happens locally? Short-term, imbalance may increase. Long-term, cultural adaptation often follows. When supply shifts, behavior adjusts. Dating norms may recalibrate. Expectations may soften. Communication styles may evolve. Social systems are dynamic. They react. They don't stay frozen. And there's one more element we need to talk about. Responsibility. It's easy to frame this movement as either empowerment or exploitation. But real life is more complicated. If someone relocates purely for leverage, resentment may grow later. If someone relocates with humility, curiosity, and long-term commitment, outcomes look different. The mindset matters more than the passport. Intent shapes trajectory. Now let's imagine two possible futures. Future 1. Global dating becomes normalized. Cross-cultural marriages increase. Immigration systems streamline for legitimate couples. People prioritize compatibility over geography. Cultural understanding improves. Future 2. Polarization deepens. Online hostility increases. Gender narratives harden. Resentment becomes identity. Exploitation stories dominate headlines. Regulations tighten. Trust decreases. Which future unfolds depends less on the movement itself and more on how individuals behave within it. Because here's the quiet truth. Most people, men and women, want similar things. Stability, respect, affection, trust, a partner who shows up. The methods may differ. The geography may differ. But the emotional needs are surprisingly consistent. When people forget that, conflict grows. When people remember it, cooperation becomes possible. Now let's end with something practical. If someone is considering this lifestyle, 3 questions matter. Am I seeking alignment or escape? Am I prepared for integration or just novelty? Am I offering value beyond money or nationality? Those questions determine whether this becomes growth or regret. And if someone disagrees with the movement entirely, there are questions too. What unmet need is driving its growth? What economic pressures are shaping behavior? What role does technology play? Ignoring a trend doesn't eliminate it. Understanding it does more. So where does this leave us? The passport bro phenomenon isn't just about men flying overseas. It's about globalization colliding with dating culture. It's about economics influencing intimacy. It's about identity evolving faster than consensus. It's about mobility reshaping opportunity. It's about how people respond when they feel unseen. And that story is bigger than one movement. It's about the future of relationships in a borderless world. We live in an era where you can fall in love thousands of miles away with a swipe. But distance is no longer the barrier. Depth is. And depth requires effort no matter the country. So maybe the most important question isn't, is the passport bro movement good or bad? Maybe the real question is, in a world where everyone can go anywhere, will we become more transactional or more intentional? Because wherever people travel, that choice travels with them. All right, we've talked about motivations. We've talked about economics. We've talked about culture, legality, risk, identity, and the future. Now it's time to close this out properly. Not with hype, not with judgment, but with clarity. Step back for a second. Strip away the label passport bro. Strip away TikTok clips, headlines, arguments, and online insults. What are we really looking at? We're looking at men who feel dissatisfied with their local dating environment. We're looking at a globalized world where mobility is easier than ever. We're looking at economic pressure reshaping relationships. We're looking at shifting gender roles, creating confusion for some and empowerment for others. And we're watching all of that collide in real time. This movement didn't appear out of nowhere. It grew in the gap between expectation and experience. When people feel unseen, they look elsewhere. When people feel undervalued, they search for appreciation. When people feel priced out of a lifestyle, they find a different market. That's human behavior. Not conspiracy. Not ideology. Behavior. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Changing geography doesn't automatically fix internal patterns. If someone struggles with communication at home, they will struggle abroad. If someone lacks emotional maturity, a plane ticket won't create it. If someone leads with ego instead of empathy, that energy follows them. And the same applies in reverse. If someone is thoughtful, respectful, and serious about building something long-term, those traits translate anywhere. Location changes the context. It doesn't change the character. There's also something important we haven't said clearly enough. Not every international relationship is exploitation. And not every international relationship is romantic destiny either. Some are beautiful, balanced, and deeply mutual. Some are transactional. Some begin with genuine interest and collapse under cultural strain. Some begin with curiosity and grow into lifelong partnership. The outcome depends less on nationality and more on intention, compatibility, and integrity. The internet tends to flatten everything into extremes. Supporters say it's freedom and empowerment. Critics say it's predatory and unequal. Reality sits somewhere in the middle. For some men, this path feels like relief. For some women abroad, it feels like opportunity. For others, it feels uncomfortable or unfair. All of those perceptions can exist at the same time. And that's why this topic is so controversial. Because it touches pride, identity, money, gender, culture, power, all the things people are already sensitive about. But here's the bigger shift. This isn't just about dating. It's about globalization entering the most personal part of life. For decades, globalization affected jobs, products, and travel. Now it's affecting relationships. Your romantic options are no longer limited by your zip code. That's new in human history. And whenever something new happens at scale, tension follows. So where does this go from here? If trends continue, international dating will likely become more common, not less. Remote work will continue expanding. Translation tools will improve. Air travel will remain accessible. Global social media will keep shrinking perceived distance. The label passport bro may eventually fade, but cross-border relationships won't. They'll normalize. And when they do, the conversation may shift from controversy to practicality. Less outrage, more logistics, less ideology, more compatibility questions. But here's the final layer. None of this replaces personal responsibility. If you go abroad, you still have to show up as a good partner. If you stay home, you still have to show up as a good partner. If you're frustrated, you still have to examine yourself. If you're confident, you still have to remain humble. No passport replaces character. No culture replaces effort. No income replaces emotional intelligence. Those fundamentals don't change across borders. So maybe the real takeaway isn't about choosing a country. Maybe it's about asking better questions. Am I looking for alignment? Or am I running from discomfort? Am I prepared to integrate into another culture? Or do I expect it to revolve around me? Am I building something stable or chasing validation? Because wherever you go, those questions follow. And here's the final thought. The Passport Bro movement is a signal. A signal that something in modern dating feels off for many people. A signal that economic strain affects intimacy. A signal that globalization is reshaping more than markets. Whether you agree with it or dislike it, ignoring it won't make it disappear. Understanding it is more useful. Because once you understand the forces behind something, you see the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is this. We are living through a transition period in relationships. Old norms are fading. New norms aren't fully formed. Mobility is increasing. Expectations are shifting. And everyone is trying to figure out where they fit. So I'll leave you with this. If borders are becoming optional, if location is becoming flexible, if opportunity is global, then the most important question isn't where you date. It's who you are when you do. Because in the end, the passport opens doors. But character determines what happens after they open. And that's something no country can provide for you. What do you think this movement really represents? Freedom, frustration, adaptation, or something else entirely? Let me know your perspective. And as always, think critically, stay balanced, and look deeper than the headline. Don't forget to subscribe on your way out. See you next video.